Welcome to another episode of Take a Look with Ryan and Daryl. Today in the studio, I have Payam Shelgen. I'm butchering the last name again. I'm sorry, Payam. And Lee Lowen. Thank you. They're the co-owners of Instead, a tiny home building construction company. Welcome to the show, guys. Excited to have you on.
Thank you for having us. Your question about what was our philosophy is it can go, if we start talking about that, it can go two ways. We either get very meta with it or we get very, very sad and depressed. No, I'm just joking. I'll start and you can jump in anytime. I think we are both industrial designers. So I think that's a big part of it. We are kind of, our schooling has been, use your skill set, be creative, find a problem that doesn't have a solution yet, and then create something viable to solve that problem. And then, we were given the creative skill sets in school to do that. And industrial designers end up working on products, like, from a cup to, we kind of came to it later in life after having explored our careers separately, came to it out of circumstance and living scenarios and having had talks about housing and where does everybody live and what kind of stuff we want to design. We came back to it and thought, hey, why not apply our skill set and our creative thinking and figure out a solution for this problem that we were facing at the time. And that was like not really knowing what we could afford, what we could continue to afford to live into, where do you even live, and that kind of stuff. So it was very open and explorative at the beginning, I would say.
Yeah, it was kind of looking at also what do we want to live in, or what do we want to purchase?
Yeah.
Because I guess the traditional housing route is very traditional and pretty fixed. Just the way of getting into the housing market, you don't really have a whole lot of options, especially if you're looking to live affordably, if you're looking to live within your means.
Especially right now.
Especially right now. And for me, this, we started this about roughly 3 years ago. And at that time, I was very seriously considering either building or buying a houseboat and living in the Bluffers Park Marina, which I still think is a beautiful vision of housing. So I've always been very interested in alternative ways of housing. Even the apartment that we lived in Toronto was a converted storefront, which was very, very industrial, exposed brick, exposed metal ceilings. We hung hammocks from the ceilings and everything, and it was fun.
You guys both industrial designers? Did you guys meet at school? How did you guys meet?
In Toronto, through groups of friends. We had a common shared group of designer friends who worked in the industry, and that's how we got to know each other. I think our passion for architecture has been also something we've shared together. Passion for architecture has been something we've shared along the way. Sending each other links of, look at this cool design. Oh, look how these other people are doing it in other countries where housing is not as accessible. Similar to here, the tiny home movement has been prevalent through social media. There's been shows, even on HGTV about it. So it's not an unknown concept. It was under our radar. And we looked at it as a product. We thought, hey, tiny homes, your typical sort of definition of a tiny home, and you Google something and the result come up is tiny homes on wheels. They are a product that's decoupled from the land. It was created in an environment where you could do that in Australia and New Zealand, areas where you could be a little bit more, the climate allows it to be a little bit more mobile. Also, the way that I guess people have a relationship with their environment made it coming here now to Canada, that concept. We took that on and we were like, hey, there aren't too many people who are building tiny homes on wheels. It's tiny home movement in Canada. Why don't we start playing with that and see if we can come up with a concept that would be a livable house, but that is on wheels. It's not attached to the land. It can be very efficient. It can be, it can run off grid. That's how we started the company in a way.
And designed for our climate.
And then designed for our climate, yeah,
right.
Which is a big part of this.
So you guys have been doing this for 3 years. I know, Payam, you especially, we've talked about this. Minimalism plays a big role into alternative living, especially in a smaller square footage space. What makes your models different than, say, the typical things on wheels? Like, obviously you're getting off the wheels, but we got to live in a different climate here in Canada. Things are a little more cold or tumultuous, but what separates you guys from what's typically going on with tiny homes?
Couple of things. Again, I think it's due to the way we were taught, to look at a problem from all sorts of angles. I think we're really good at look at issues and design challenges in a more holistic way, look at it from different angles. We're good at, systematically solve design problems. So we're not sacrificing one thing for other things. When it comes to minimalism, and then reducing your stuff in life, reducing the amount of space you have or need, you do have to be very intentional and very choosy about everything you pick and select. So I think our design background kind of gives us that ability to create small spaces that are usable without the sacrifice of, too much feeling of too much sacrifice, spaces that are they do consider just human qualities of that you want in life, right. For well-being, from natural light to natural materials. So there's one side of it. Also, looking at the issues more holistically allows us to kind of look at, cost of production, cost of operating your house. How do we design your systems in a way that allows you to run it efficiently, not have to upkeep it or spend a lot of money upkeeping the house over time. So yeah, we do look at it from all angles, and I think it should show in the product in the end.
And so, Lee, you're living in a tiny home right now, correct?
I was.
Or you were?
Yeah. So basically, the first model that we built was essentially our prototype, and we built it for myself, my wife, and we had a son. Who was basically born a couple weeks before moving into this the tiny home.
What was that experience like? Family three moving into. What was the square footage of the space?
It's about 260 square feet. Interior space.
And where were you moving in from? Were you in an apartment or a house, or what was the transition like going from?
Yeah, it was basically an apartment. At least originally in Toronto, that was about 600 square feet. But in our first apartment was 320 square feet. So we were pretty used to living in.
Wasn't too much of a shock for the.
Yeah, we were used to living in small spaces. So that part wasn't a big sacrifice or change even. We didn't even have to really downsize our belongings to do this. I guess because this was a tiny home on wheels on a friend's property, we had to set up all of our infrastructure basically from scratch. So that was a big learning curve of basically figuring out how to do everything off-grid. Disconnected from a constant electrical source, disconnected from water mains, everything. So we had to basically set all that stuff up yet for ourselves within a month while the weather was still good, because we basically finished this house beginning of September. So we didn't have long before winter was coming, and we had to set all this stuff up. So that was exciting.
What's winter like in a tiny home? Because I guess part of living on a rural lot with one is that you're kind of outdoors all the time, right?
Yeah.
So you're living in nature, but when you're when you got, say, a couple feet of snow around you.
Yeah.
Or do you find you're kind of hunkered down, or do you find you're going to town more often? What's the day-to-day look like for that?
Windows are very important. So the house we built had huge windows, like a 8-foot patio door and a 5-foot by 5-foot big picture window at the end. So, and high ceilings. So the space itself never really felt confined. You got so much natural light in, even in the winter when it's gloomy. Rarely have the lights on during the day. And like from a functionality standpoint, you can really only occupy one room at a time anyways. So that never really felt limiting. We did kind of rearrange the living area a couple times. Like we started it out very flexible with kind of these movable benches, realized we kind of want our storage a little more hidden, so got rid of that, built some storage benches and like a breakfast bar, kind of just adapted the space over time to suit what we're looking to do with it.
That's one of the beauties of tiny homes and tiny space design is that I think you end up not having to just be intentional with every corner, but also design for flexibility and change over time, because your needs do change. You know, if you're just by yourself, if you're a couple, maybe a family, your kids grow up, so your needs are constantly changing, and having this space that's so confined, typically we solve for that in a conventional home by just having empty rooms that can be flex rooms when the needs change. We're like, okay, well, that room that hasn't been used for the last 2 years now can become my office. In tiny homes, you kind of have to morph the space, and designing for that from the get-go will save you in the long run.
Yeah. When I guess I love the philosophy of the minimalist. Well, it kind of forces you kind of into minimalism, right? Like you say, everything has to be very intentional.
Yeah.
What do you think, like, the biggest hurdle for people kind of moving from a traditional living situation into something smaller? Not even necessarily a tiny home, but even something like the duplex where you're at. What is it? What are people holding on to most? Is it the space, or is that just an excuse, or is it they just?
It's the stuff. Like, most of the time, people are like, "Where am I going to put all my shit?" Like, I don't know, but we're allowed to say it. But
you can swear here. That's fine.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah. It is a very common, the common comment that we get, especially if it's more than one person. So like, I feel like if it's just you and you've already bought into this minimalism and the benefits of that, then you can make a move on that. But if it's you and you're living with someone else, well, you have to be considerate of what that someone else is gonna need, and often people are not on the same frequency as what level of minimum, even if they're both like, let's reduce our stuff, but they may not be necessarily on the same bandwidth. Like, what level of minimalism are we going to go for? Right. Some people are like, I could be like, you know what? I don't want any of my things. I can fit everything I have in a backpack. But the next person is like, no, I still have to have my comic book collection.
Right.
So, where do I put all of my sporting equipment or whatever that may be that you're really attached to? So, like, making sure that you understand where. So, it gets a little bit more complicated when there's more than one person.
What is it, do you think, that people, like, through their stuff, they don't want to get rid of it? Why are they holding on to it? Like, what do you hear people saying? What are the reasons? They're like, I can't give up this collection or this or that for what?
We don't get personal with people, so it's just speculations I could make. Sentimental value is one thing. If it's a big part of who you are, that's another thing. Like, you're not going to want to let go of those things, and that's fair. Like, we like, I don't think we're like, oh, you have to get rid of everything. Yeah. You can design for it to accommodate for the special things that you have in your life. People should just talk to designers about it. They shouldn't be afraid to ask, be like, hey, like, there's this thing that's important to me. Let's prioritize it.
Right.
And then design it in the process.
And it's not just a...
Sorry. The audio's not quite synced. Is that going to be a problem? Or I just want to ask before I got too far into it.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
That's fine, because I'm going to sync it later. Yeah, no, that's fine. You're good. Thank you.
Do we look dubbed?
Yeah. No, I'll sing it later.
Dubbed.
So I mean, but for you and your wife, like, it wasn't just a jump into have nothing,
we've been
right?
we've been getting rid of stuff like since forever. When we moved in together, both of us realized that we had too much stuff. We were still young in our like late 20s. We had so much stuff in a one small bedroom apartment that was filling up all of our living room full of boxes, essentially. So then we were like, okay, well, there has to be a better way. I had just come out of design school as well, so the whole like Dieterams less but better sort of like ethos was on my mind from again the education that I brought forward. So we kind of talked about it, and I think over time we both found the benefit of it. It can be addictive. You start doing it and you're like, oh my god, this actually feels really good. But that first jump in is tough for a lot of people. People come to us to talk about tiny living with hesitance. They love the idea, but they're still asking, what do I do with all my stuff?
Yeah.
I love
wardrobes are a big challenge for people. Like the easiest thing you can do is just simplifying your wardrobe, but that tends to be almost like a personality shift for a lot of people. So,
well, is that what it takes then? Is it a very, do you need therapy basically to look within and start removing some of these people? Maybe
I think that could be helpful. Yeah.
Like what is it going to take, I guess, for maybe our culture and our communities to really kind of take a look and be like, we have just all this crap that is weighing us down, literally. And
I'm not entirely sure. There are people who have been talking about this loudly. There are documentaries made about the minimalism movement. There is Marie Kondo on Netflix has a show. So there's tiny homes are. So people know about the benefits of this. What would it take? I don't know. We have to just relook at our consumeristic behavior, which is also reinforced by everything we watch and look at every day, right? Everything you see every day is promoting this behavior of you gotta use, you gotta buy, you gotta to define who you are and get little dopamine hits to feel good. Like, we have to kind of like overcome the therapy. Yeah, it's like social therapy almost.
Right. Yeah, we're in this kind of hyper materialistic consumerism stage of our culture, and it's and I don't know if it's getting any better on our side, but go ahead, Lee.
I think we also like project this onto kids, and we think that we have to buy them all the newest toys and stuff, and then their room becomes like a nightmare to clean up all the time. But why?
Yeah, man, I feel that way. We have a playroom, and it's just there's toys everywhere, and getting them to clean up that thing is like I always threaten, like, I'm coming up with a garbage bag. Anything that's not put away, I'm tossing out, and maybe I probably should, because I don't think they're any happier for it, really, because they're happy with a stick in the backyard.
Exactly.
Right? They don't need much to entertain themselves.
Yeah, to take a positive sort of spin on this conversation, I actually think kids who, like your child who grew up in a small house from the very beginning, was born in a tiny home, he recognizes and points at his tiny house. That's his in vocabulary, and that was, like if that's the picture that they're used to seeing, there's a chance that they would grow up and not having that consumeristic thing embedded in their brain.
Right.
But then as soon as you go to school and you want an iPhone, then that kind of changes everything.
Yeah. Well, I find even just going through the store with the kids, it's like, I want that. It's like, you can look, we're not buying anything. I just set the expectation the way we're just getting what we need, and then we're moving on, right?
Just let them play with it at the time and then leave. You don't have to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even let them touch it, though. It just turns into a disaster at that point.
Yeah.
So you guys have been doing the tiny homes, and now you guys are moving into a bit more. Is it more modular, or what would you call this new? Tell me about the new stuff you guys are doing.
Yeah, modular. I mean, we prefab houses. So meaning that we build them in a factory setting, in a shop setting. We have a shop in Bloomfield, and we build them there, and then we bring them to where the client is. Our houses, like the way we started, we put them on a mobile foundation or a trailer chassis, tiny homes on wheels. That's how we started the business, and then realized very quickly if they were to be applied as a housing solution as a legal dwelling, then the trailer chassis and the mobility, or that decoupling of house and land, was becoming very problematic. There's a few other things in there, but that was kind of like the primary reason for us to kind of look at another model, a house essentially that is still small, but you can't call it a tiny home by definition. Anything bigger than 400 square feet starts kind of not being a tiny home anymore.
How big
a
are
compact
these
square. The first one that we just built is a 2-bedroom, 520 square foot house.
Okay.
We could build them probably up to 700 square feet. So you're still looking at a compact home, but they're not the typical definition of a tiny home because they're now bigger. Still, a compact house is still factory built, built in a shop, inspected there and brought. Now the definition is that the difference is that they are put on a permanent foundation on site as opposed to being mobile. It connects them back to the land. So zoning bylaw, building permit, and financing all now are
they now allow you into that category.
Exactly.
And does that, so in the county, for example, I know they have now allowed garden suites for the past couple of years now, and there's some federal and provincial incentives as well for that. Are you guys able to kind of tap into that?
That's what we are looking at. With the introduction of Bill 23 in Ontario, across Ontario, any property, depending on their zoning and their setback, is allowed to have a secondary suite on it by just definition across the board. You just have to look at your setback. Do I have room in a buildable area? So it's removed some of the unclarity, or like, can I do it? Can I do it? It's removed some of that and made it a little bit more clear. But yeah, coach houses have been a concept for many generations. Now they're just getting a new title and a new name. ADUs, or accessory dwelling units, or secondary dwelling units, garden house, backyard house, whatever you want to call it, right? They are permanent dwellings put on a permanent foundation, typically on a property that already has a primary dwelling there. That's a big part of it. You can put a small house on a foundation on a vacant land as a primary dwelling, but you are developing a vacant piece of land, right? So whereas if there is a primary dwelling there is already an asset there you can leverage for financing. There's already service connections there. There's a lot of infrastructure already built there. So yeah, we saw that as an opportunity to create more homes. It would be just in people's backyards.
Well, and what a great solution to, there's a bit of a housing crisis on, if you guys noticed.
Just a bit.
Just a little bit, well, and so I know the county, they reduced the minimum square footage for new builds. Does any of your models qualify for that?
So Prince Edward County zoning, you can apply for a build permit for a building as long as it fits the definitions and parameters outlined by building code. Building code says the smallest habitable dwelling is 188 square feet. So anything above that, you can apply for a build permit. And if you have done your due diligence and your engineering and design to code, they should give you a build permit for that. Prior to this, I forget the date when this change happened, but in a lot of cases, actually in Ontario, you couldn't apply for a build permit for a tiny house. There were sort of incentives and motivations to build bigger homes. There was a minimum square footage requirements, not so much anymore. It's changing.
Right. Well, and speaking kind of having these houses as a solution to a lot of the housing crisis, like as garden suites, that's great, but that's only like one additional unit per property. Do you guys have ambitions to kind of push forward maybe tiny or smaller home communities? Is this something that's happening, or are you getting pushback from the municipality or the governments? What's going on with that kind of solution?
Like philosophically, we would definitely encourage that. It's not something that we could necessarily cover the capital for. We could help a developer by providing homes, but we're not developers. And
do you guys know of any developers pushing that kind of stuff?
So we're starting to look at partnerships. It's a very good point. Like at the end of the day, our skill sets and what we're good at is building the house itself. We're finding that what like the concept of a manufactured home, a prefabricated house in a factory setting or shop setting, starts making more and more financial sense in the overall financial picture of a house. The more of them you make, right? So as a builder, we'd like to work with a developer who has the ability and the capital and access to land to be like, you know what, let's do a tiny home village. It's so many benefits there because now you're producing more units, so your certification in your process becomes financially more sensible for a builder. Cost overhead becomes more sensible for the builder. Like, you know, we can. So there's benefits there, but also on the property itself, you're sharing infrastructure now. Right. Like you're doing a bigger development with shared sewage or septic system or waste management system, shared water and electricity, stuff like that is very viable. So though we can't do it, and that's not what we do, we just build the homes, we are constantly knocking on people's doors and we're saying, hey, like, you want to do something like that? Let's do it together, because you only can do it together.
Well, and I was actually talking about this over the weekend with my wife. It's like, well, we're on 3 acres, and I can, like, there's enough space there to easily pop down another 3 units, like something like that you guys are doing with the modular homes. But we're even just fighting with the county just to even being able to put anything there.
There's no shortage of space in Canada. That's what we have.
So it seems like it's the natural solution. Is like, hey, okay, we can do smaller homes, because even back during World War II, like we see all the wartime housing in many small Ontario communities, right? You just see those little boxes, tiny little homes, which aren't really much bigger than or at all even bigger than some of the modular homes you're doing. And they had a wartime, what was it they called? Is the Wartime Builder Act or something? I forget what it was, but they basically allowed them to build these houses to, one, they couldn't afford it, which is the biggest issue, but I mean, we're kind of back in that now. It's like, for a young family to buy a new home, like, if you're looking at $500,000, you're looking at something that's not necessarily livable. That's entry level. That's wild. Not exactly on the affordable side.
For sure, yeah.
And that's definitely the type of new construction that we need. We don't need homes that are bigger than 1,000 square foot for most families. It's the challenge becomes for developers. The profit margins are just so much smaller for affordable homes, for homes that are suited to people's budgets. And
yeah, for sure. Like the smaller a house gets, like the more cost goes into every square, because you're basically including a bathroom and a kitchen in a house, regardless of the size of it, and your plumbing and your systems are the most expensive part of a house. So the smaller you make it, the smaller your profit margin is per square foot. So developers are incentivized by all fronts. Like even banks, when you go and look for financing, they would prefer to give you a mortgage on a bigger house than a smaller house. If the house is below 600 square feet, they may not even look at it. Right. That's still changing. Like there's change coming, because this you're like you were saying, we did this before. We just now have to figure out how to apply the same concept as smaller prefabricated dwellings to modern times. Just don't think we have the political or the infrastructure. You know, the political infrastructure. It's not laid out yet. Zoning bylaws are catching up. Building code is on province dependent here, and is defined by Ontario. They put out brochures defining tiny homes, prefab modular homes. Yeah. These are the process, but the governance of those guidelines is left to the local municipalities. So everyone is trying to figure this out right now, independently of each other. There's a lot of, I think, wasted effort there. So some of the things that I'd like to get involved with is like just connect some of these dots. I talked to folks from Rideau Lakes that are dealing with the same thing. We were at a tiny home show in Ottawa. So much conversation in Ottawa Valley happening about tiny homes. You name it, Ancaster, all the way from that side of Ontario, because it is an issue. But yeah, your municipalities are going to have to open up to it, and your financial institutions are going to have to open up to to financing small living or small homes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I think that's probably one of the bigger roadblocks is the financing part of it. Because I know, like, my brother, he's a union carpenter in the city, and he talks to developers all the time, and he's like, the margins even for bigger developments are so small because, well, the cost of everything's so high. Interest is higher, let's say. It's not like it was the 80s when it was like 18%, but it's still high relatively than it was, even 5 years ago. So, yeah, there's a lot of roadblocks there. On the municipality front, have you gotten like local support from the municipality for this kind of business, or are you got advocates in Shire Hall for you guys, or?
Yeah, and I mean, it depends on how you define support. If you mean by like people acknowledging that it's a good idea and we need to have it, yes, we have had that, like verbal support. Tons of local support in connecting us to, hey, like these guys are talking about this. When it comes to application, it will depend on the day that we want to put a house down in Prince Edward County. We haven't actually done that yet. We are a startup. We built 2 houses that are on a trailer chassis, and Prince Edward County was, I use the term Prince Edward County. I'm generalizing a lot of people here, but the general census was like, small living is a great idea. Your houses are beautiful, but take them off the wheels because these are vehicles certified as RVs. They're not permitted dwellings. So the last year we spent designing this house in response to that feedback. We just appointed a new chief building officer in Prince Edward County. So it's new days. It's for early days. Right. I hope for support. I think Prince Edward County is probably one of the more progressive ones. We have the chance to set an example for the rest of the province, but maybe that's just me being optimistic.
Yeah. It can be.
Yeah, it can be.
It can be one of the more progressive ones.
Yeah, at times.
I guess it depends issue to issue. There seems to be both sides of it in the county of, yes, we need to grow and develop and have housing solutions, and then, but not in my backyard, right? That's
exactly. And at the end of the day, we just built the house. We'd like to put 10 of them down, somewhere in Prince Edward County for the purposes of them being used as affordable houses, whether they are sold or whether they are leased to own or whether they're rented. That's up to that said developer. We're limited in what our reach is going to be in changing the conversation. Yeah.
So why did you guys, how did you land up in Prince Edward County? Did you guys pick this place for?
No, I lived there already. Okay. When we started talking about this, I convinced him to move from Toronto. We lived there already because we couldn't afford anything in Toronto. My wife and I moved there in 2017 to Picton because it was still a more affordable option. And also, it's very attractive because, especially then, and I still think that Picton especially has this draw for a lot of entrepreneurs and people who have wanting to have a business of their own from bigger cities like Toronto. They just couldn't afford to do it there, but this gives them a chance to have that dream come to realization. And we were attracted to it, so we moved here. And a few years later, these guys moved. Yeah,
nice. And no regrets. You're still here.
No regrets. No, we are still here.
What was it like?
It's expensive. I gotta say,
it's gotten a little more expensive.
It's just a little bit.
I moved here in 2013, I believe, and it was the cost of living was nice and low, right? And it kind of caught up with a vengeance out here because now not only
everywhere,
has the housing kind of caught up, but you also have the tourism prices for groceries and everything tacked on there. So now we're kind of living in a.
For sure, yeah.
But like you say, we live in a beautiful area. Like there's
a lot to be appreciative of and not taking for granted. For sure, it's like the skies we have here is just like amazing.
Well, and the community is amazing. Like you say, we do have a very progressive community in a lot of categories. And I think people, especially on the entrepreneurial side, there are a lot of cool businesses, people kind of coming out here to live the county dream and start families and live a good life. And it's that's why we're out here. We love being out here, and it is super unique. I mean, you're halfway between Toronto and Ottawa too, and here I go just advertising for the county.
I know.
You're welcome. Visit PEC.
Yeah. You just increased the price of housing, by the
way. So what's next for you guys? You guys are is it really focusing on the modular homes to kind of get those kind of systemized, or where are you guys at in the business side of that?
We We're figuring it out. We're figuring it out.
So are we, Payam.
No, I know. Let's be real.
Process.
It's very tough to start a business of any kind these days. We started the business during the pandemic. Also, we are a very niche, sort of undeveloped market still, right? Small living has, we were just talking about, like all these cultural roadblocks, philosophical roadblocks, bylaws, financing. How to survive as a business in that environment has been very tricky. I think what's helped us so far has been our sort of agility to kind of like on the spot change directions. We've done that once. It's very expensive to pivot. Also, construction business is very capital intensive because you're building a house, right? Like so all of the costs are upfront until you get paid. So it's been a challenge. We're trying to figure out where to focus. I think biggest conversations we've had has been around number of production. We're a small builder, right? Like we're building like a couple of units a year if we and that'll maxes us out. But we do realize that if we are trying to create a housing solution that's scalable and it's cost effective, you're required to scale as well. That's when your product actually becomes more sensible. How to do that, we don't know quite yet.
Right. So you guys are still building some processes, still kind of.
We're still building processes. We're still like looking at all of our logistics. We're taking on clients, so we are very much dependent on our clients. So if the clients come forward and say, yes, I understand your ethos, I'm with it, and I have the capital or can access the cash to do a project, we'd be happy to work with them. Yeah. A lot of our conversations lately, though, are kind of hand-holding the client to get them through that process. Like, can I even do this legally? Where do I get the money to do it? So we're doing a lot of consulting work, and you're not getting paid for that. You can't expect people to pay for that because we're also figuring it out as we go. Yeah, but maybe not for long, like because we couldn't sustain a business like that, right? So personally, I speak to this. This is a new development for us to sort of talk more about, collaboration with someone who can do quantity, like a developer idea. This is all new, but hey, if we can build a tiny home village in the next couple of years, we'll come back and we'll have another chat.
Yeah, well, and as long as I think it's the municipality kind of will allow for that kind of zoning, because I think what do they call them? It's like the kibbutz kind of style living, right, where you have a community center in the middle, houses all around. Yeah. You live in community. There's shared dwelling. There's your own. So you have, the big thing, I guess, with living with family or friends is that you need to have your own space. You do need to have appropriate boundaries there for it to work. But you're still able to rely on each other. Because I find, even in my family, like we've spread out all across the country. Now we're back all in Ontario. Yeah. But even being in Ontario, it's like still an hour and a half or hour 15 minutes to my mom's. Which that's not exactly living in community. Like I can't go over there for dinner. It's like, there's 2.5 hours just of driving out of my day to go see her, plus the time there. So the practicality, I think, of living in proximity with one another seems to make sense. And as soon as that zoning kind of comes through and they give the thumbs up, I'm on board, man. I would love to build something like that for my family.
That would be awesome, yeah. I know you had talked about multi-generational living a little bit earlier too. That's one of the benefits of having these more tight-knit communities. And again, they've been around. It's not rocket science. Yeah. We've been doing
it for forever. Even in Europe, they do that a lot more than we do here in North America. I think we've kind of gotten into this mentality of hyper-independence where, I need to have my house with
my stuff. 3 cars. We're going full circle back. Exactly. That's why we hold on to our things and we don't want to let go.
Right.
Because they fill a void.
Yeah. Where it's
personal
the answer.
Exactly.
Well, and the answer has to be community. Yeah. And I think the pandemic, if it showed us anything, is that we're not meant to do this on our own. This thing, we're supposed to do it together.
For sure.
And when we're even restricted, it's painful and it's traumatic for so many people. The worst thing you can do to a person in prison who's surrounded by all kinds of violent criminals is to put them in a room by themselves.
Right.
Like that's a punishment. So it's like when you think about that and how that affects our psyche, how we live in this beautiful country.
You have to relearn a lot of it.
Yeah, it's I'm not sure how. I mean, and maybe this is the positive silver lining of this crazy housing bubble, but maybe we're going to be forced to live together once again, and it seems to make sense, right? As your parents get older, you take care of them, but they take care of help.
Sure.
It's family, it's community, and it's
and
I think
like
that's
these sort of ADUs and backyard dwellings, and that kind of we shifted to make do apply to those scenarios very well, right? Like where I see it being applied is you have like either young kids that you want to help with because they couldn't afford anything else, or you have aging parents that want to live with you and downsize with you. So these prefabricated smaller dwellings that could be put in someone else's backyard would facilitate some of that between at least different generations of a family. It could also become rental opportunities for people because if I don't know, you're aging yourself within a big house and you don't need it. Maybe you want to downsize and have a younger tenant live in your main house, so you just have someone around, right? Like we all benefit from just being together more. You just have to learn how to do that well.
Yeah, and that's going to take I don't know. I think we're close though. It's going to take I think a generation or so to kind of get there. But I think if we start thinking like this, talking about it more, then we can actually make those changes within ourselves that the next generation sees and they can benefit from. But I want to know a bit more about the units themselves, about the construction of them. So you're doing it in a modular way, but what makes them, I guess, unique? What makes them efficient? And because I think a big part of, I know we talked about this, a big part of your philosophy is also environmentalism and making sure that we conserve our resources. There's this whole thing out there called climate change. Not great, and a big part of that is our overconsumption again. Yeah. So how is the construction side of that kind of combating that side of things?
Yeah. Well, just by reducing the overall square footage, you're reducing the amount of material required to build a house, to build the shelter that you need. We also focus on the best building practices that we currently know of, at least in terms of traditional house framing and insulation. Like our little 520 square foot house in the shop, we're still doing 2x6 framing with R22 in bats, mineral wool bats, with Zip R9.6 exterior continuous insulation. So we've got R 33, 34 or something.
Do math quickly.
So you're nice and cozy in there.
Nice and cozy, yeah.
All winter we were heating this house with essentially a space heater that you put under your desk to warm your legs, and that kept the entire house above 22 degrees all winter.
We just put a heat pump in them usually?
Yeah.
Although we're required to add some other form of
heating source or something.
Yeah.
Can you put a little wood stove in there or something? Or would that even just be too much?
You can't. It would tend to be too much. The challenge is when you make a house so efficient, so sealed, air circulation, ventilation becomes super important. And when you put in a wood burning stove, that has to be properly direct vented outside, so you're not burning your interior air. There's a lot of potential risks to adding a wood burning stove into a high performance house, and it tends to be pretty unnecessary. It's a lot of additional labor. Just make a fire outside.
Yeah, no, I know there's a lot of romance around wood burning stoves, but for what it costs you, and also the safety measures you have to put in place, especially in a small space, to have the right distances and right materials, just to avoid any dangers and stuff like that. And so all the sort of experts and the licenses that you have to get involved to do it right will end up making you rethink a little bit. Is that the right necessary
It becomes
expense?
less romantic.
Yeah, it becomes less romantic. And also, you don't really need it. The performance of the house is, like, I want to add to what Lee was talking about, because there's like 3 parts to it to me. There's the insulation, and a lot of people focus on that when we have people that are like, well, what's the insulation value, right? It's fair. And then how it's insulated is another layer of it. It's like some of that is on the outside. So these building practices are teaching us these things about insulation. There is another part to it that most people don't think about is just air sealing and making sure your house is airtight, especially in our climate. Unfortunately, a lot of homes that you see are just very leaky, and they just bring in air from the outside, or they don't allow for the inside stale air to be transported outside.
Most traditional houses rely on the gaps in the framing and between sheets and stuff to bring in fresh air. Like that's how they've functioned for a long time. But now when you're making something highly efficient, super sealed up, now you need some type of mechanical means of bringing in fresh air, exhausting stale air, which are
required actually, right, and is required by code. So it makes sense. It creates a healthier environment for you, but it's all expensive stuff. And then the last out of the 3, the insulation, air sealing, is just your glazing. Spend money on good windows. Everyone loves big, beautiful windows, and we don't blame them. It's a big part of the house, big part of bringing the outside in, bringing natural light in. But windows are very expensive. They can be a big chunk of your overall build budget. So make sure you spend the money on the right specifications. We all love black windows, but they're a ton more expensive than just white windows. Whereas you can get triple pane white windows, for the same budget, let's say, as you were to get more design trendy sort of black windows. So there is some education there to be done as well around efficiency of the homes. But you can run this house off of a 100 amp circuit, and it's all electric. Keeps you comfortable and cozy all year round.
Well, what I like too is that with the smaller square footage, you can actually go for the premium finishes as well, which that's more important to me. Because like a big house is great, but if you have the cheaper finishes, it kind of really takes away from the space, no matter how big it is. So I mean, I love that. What was the model that we shot for you?
P02.
P02. I just love the finishes you used for the siding.
The maple finish, just the Maybach on the outside. Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. Like you were saying, it's you or the whole less but better principle applies to all of those. Like you have a lot less floor to cover, so you may be able to spend a little bit of money and get hardwood flooring if you want or engineered flooring to benefit from, because you have only 500 square foot to cover. So whereas if you had a 3,000-4,000 square foot home and you wanted to spend that much money per square foot, you would think twice, right? So it allows you to have just better materials in your space.
I think that's a good place to probably to close her up, guys. Unless there's anything else we want to mention or talk about. I get pumped every time I talk to you, Payam. We talk about it all the time. I get excited. I love seeing your passion come out just in just how you talk about things, and I think it's just a real tangible solution, like to this housing problem that we have, and it makes sense to me. Like plop 1 or 2. Like I got 3 acres. I should be able to put 2 or 3 of them down, right? Ideally.
It makes sense.
And I think it not only does it solve housing, and not only does it solve maybe a bit of the social issues of lack of community, but from the political side of it, it's like we're bringing in people to create more revenue in the community, to spend more, to, is that not wanted or desired? So I think from my perspective, it looks like there's kind of the old guard is kind of changing. As us millennials are taking over slowly. We are no longer the future; we are the present, Payam. We're it. But we need more guys like yourselves to come up with new products and ideas to really kind of push us forward. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I'm excited to kind of follow along, and we'll make some more great content with you guys too.
Yeah, so thank you for having us. I'm glad that the passion comes out, because one of the things we were talking about yesterday is just you get defeated after a while, because you could be like, oh, I love this idea, I think it makes a lot of sense, And then you meet folks like yourself who validate you, and they're like, oh, I think it makes a lot of sense. People who come to our show, follow us on Instagram, they're like, oh, you guys are doing good work, right? You start sort of kind of feeling defeated though, like when you kind of like try and put these things in place and make them real. So I'm glad that our passion is still come through, because
Well, I think that's the entrepreneurial struggle all the time, right? It's just like
it's the millennial struggle.
Every once or maybe once a quarter, it's like, why am I doing this?
Exactly.
This is ridiculous. I'm just gonna start over.
I have it on my calendar. I have it on my calendar every second Monday of the month. I question the existence of everything. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Stare into the abyss and wonder about the meaning of my life. Exactly. But then also when you have something that there is so much, opposition to in the traditional way of doing things, that you got to push even harder.
You got to push harder.
So
and go against the stream. It's a salmon run,
I
salmon
think
swimming.
So. I think so, because I mean, always, if you're a developer too, it's like you're going to pick the development that you're going to make the biggest margins on, because that's capitalism, and maybe one of the downfalls of it, but also a motivator, which is a good thing. It's complicated, but we do need to have innovative solutions that are feasible, that that there's developers out there that are willing to take a chance on it and see,
100%.
there is money here to be made, and it's not just about the money, but it's also about better communities.